At this time, welcome everyone. I'll call the Crow Wing County Budget Committee meeting for November 10th, 2021 to order. And I'll turn it over to Nick to begin the presentation.
Good morning, Commissioners. First up on our list is a budget amendment request from Facilities for the addition of a server in our Facilities Department related to the security cameras here on campus. And I'll let John kind of explain it and go through it.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. The budget amendment is for an additional camera server for our campus camera video. We are, the current server is about 3 years old. We're at capacity. The servers can handle about 110 to 120 cameras, and we are there. We're in that 115 camera range right now. So the last few cameras that we've added, we've kind of held our breath to make sure that nothing happens. So this budget amendment request is to transfer from a couple of this year's CIP projects that are complete and the funding is available over to purchase an additional server. That would allow us to have 2 servers instead of 1 large server. And so if we lost 1 server, we could still have part of the campus cameras up. And there's also a fail-safe system. So if 1 server were to go down, it would automatically transfer the cameras that we pre-designated to the active server. So we could pick out those most critical cameras that we want to run no matter what. So.
Okay, so that explains, because my question, John, was going to be how we provide redundancy when the one is full.
It would not be, we would not have total redundancy, we would have partial redundancy.
Right.
So we would have to pick and choose which, if 1 server failed, which cameras we would want to flip over and be the high priority ones until we could get an additional repair to the existing server.
Thank you for that clarity. I appreciate that.
Yep.
Questions for John? We're on the camera system, the server for the camera system.
It seems like two servers would make sense, though, for the quantity that we've got, rather than going to just, like you say, upgrading to 1.
It's a little more work up front, but from a safety and reliability factor for our campus video surveillance, 2 servers is definitely the way to go.
So we're looking at about $32,380 to accomplish this, and we're all comfortable with that?
Yes.
You probably already mentioned it, but this is a reallocation of existing CIP dollars, and so it's not new CIP dollars. He's looking to reallocate it from other projects.
So go.
Thank you, sir. It's a go for IT, more for them to do. The next topic, and this one has a couple of chapters. We've been approached by 2 potential tenants, and they're both interested size-wise and location in the suite in the basement of Land Services. One tenant is Lakes Area Restorative Justice Project, who is looking for a space. The second one that approached us was the Department of Public Safety driver vehicle licensing that has been housed in the annex at the city of Brainerd. They shut down due to COVID. They're coming back online. The city of Brainerd is terminating their lease with DPS, so they're looking for a home. They reached out to us. The city folks over there directed them our way because they knew we had some square footage. So the first situation I'd like to talk to you about is we have 2 potential tenants that are interested in the same spot. I would have never, if you would have asked me this was going to happen 90 days ago, I'd have said no way. So the first tenant is Lakes Area Restorative Justice, but they are not in a position as of yet to be able to move forward in leasing a space. They're working through some public funding and some processes in their business. The Department of Public Safety, they're ready. They want us to work up a lease right now. They need to be in a space preferably by January 1st, no later than January 31st. So well, we could make that happen for them. So we have a little bit of a conflict, and how do we select which one we move forward? I think the one that is in front of us and ready to go is certainly the way to go. The other part of this is in the committee of the whole meeting in December, lease strategy is on your agenda. So I will be there with Debbie Erickson and some other folks, and we'll be talking about how are we going to use our existing floor space and how are we going to cut, do we want to chop that up? What are our future needs? That whole discussion is going to happen. So we could at that time, if we did choose to go to Department of Public Safety and let them be the tenant, we could talk next month about how could we accommodate another tenant in maybe one of our other spaces. So
So I have a quick question about DPS, because I know when they are doing their driver's tests, people pull up in their cars and they park. Is parking going to be an issue for them?
So we have two things we should talk about there. One is they have requested one parking spot for 2 days a week, Monday and Thursday out here, so we could designate a 1-hour spot for their driving test, their actual behind-the-wheel test. So I don't think that's going to be a problem for us. The other interesting thing is they do semi-trailer road tests. So what we would have to do most likely is take a row of the parking spaces over across the street on the east end of the jail and just make that for semi-parking. There's not a lot of that. They did 58 CDL licenses, road tests in 2019 before they shut down. They offer it 2 days a week. But they only did 58, I think, in 2019, which was their last full year being open. So we've been monitoring that parking lot across the street. We've gone back and looked at our campus video, and we've looked at how people are parking and what the traffic is in that lot. And we have the capacity right now to take one of those rows out for a semi. And whether they would come in off of Laurel and exit on Second or come in off of Second, that would depend on their testing route and what direction they needed to be headed in with the semi.
So with respect to that, where we're taking a row of parking spaces, what is the length of the contract that they're asking for, or the lease?
They have not asked. They were on a year-to-year lease with the city of Bremen, from what I understand. So I'm thinking we can ask for 3 or 5 or whatever you would like to entertain.
Questions concerning this? So I'm just going to follow up on the one where we have a parking space out here that would be dedicated to them. Not everybody comes in a nice orderly fashion. What's the anticipation of somebody coming and taking our other spots that we have for our normal customer base that comes here?
I think we're going to have to make it a point in the lease that we want most of their clients to park on the other side of Laurel Street in the public lot by the jail and not take up all of our spots for our customers.
Okay?
An option.
And I'm only speaking for myself, but I think if they're ready to sit down and look at a lease, they're the ones most ready, that we need to accommodate that. And we move forward with that, and the restorative justice group, when they're prepared, we'll look at what other spaces we have available at that time.
Mm-hmm. The Department of Public Safety would also have really consistent funding versus restorative justice.
Yep.
Yep.
So,
I agree.
so you got 4 of us.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I also see a potential need for a subsequent budget amendment. What would that be in relation to?
So the second chapter to this story is the elevator at Land Services. So we had previously planned on requesting CIP dollars in 2023 to begin replacing the elevator at Land Services. It's a 50-year-old hydraulic elevator, or, well, almost 50. It's 45, 46 years old now, and it gives us some problems. So if there would be capacity in the budget, I would like to talk about moving that elevator repair up because of the increased foot traffic that will be coming as a result of bringing DPS and DVS in. There will be a significant increase in foot traffic in that facility, and we anticipate that elevator is going to get used a lot more than it has been. And it's in rough shape. It's an old elevator.
It's slow.
Pardon me?
It's slow.
It's slow. It's not ventilated right. The lighting's poor. The mechanical systems are 45 years old. It's an old elevator. And before I get into specifics of cost, keep in mind that at some point, the Minnesota code book for elevators, they're going to make us replace that elevator. They're going to say, that's a 50-year-old hydraulic elevator. You have 5 years to replace it. At some point, they will tell us that. So that's coming anyway. So as we talk about the elevator, the total cost with contingency to replace that elevator, we call it a modernization, would be $226,000. It's got a $40,000 contingency in it. So we're expecting the cost to be about $186,000 with the contingency of $40,000. That's a big contingency, and the reason for that is that cylinder goes down below grade into the ground in the basement, about 15 feet. So until they pull that piston out of there, they can't see what's happened over time in that cylinder. And that's a concrete cylinder that was poured down below grade. So that if there's been corrosion or that's broken down, we may have to get into a position where we have to bust that out, drill a new hole, re-pour that to receive the new cylinder. So it could get very expensive. We don't think it is. There's about a 10% chance of that happening, but there is a chance. The $186,000 is everything except for the elevator shaft. It's a new car, or the cab, what you call it. It's all new electrical, ventilation, lighting, the new hydraulic jack, new hydraulic system, pumps, piping, new controllers. The elevator would be done and ready for another 30 to 40 years of service.
So a quick question on that. You obviously talked to a vendor.
A couple, yes, sir.
Okay, so do they have this unit available?
We're looking at 8 to 10 weeks for delivery of components and another 2 to 3 weeks for installation. So we're looking at a 12 to 14 week lead time if we were to say go today.
That's their assurances. Here's my issue.
Okay.
I've watched the remodel of the cafe out at the airport, and the hood for over the grill, it has delayed that remodel out there by a couple months. And so this is even a bigger project when you think about the aluminum that's involved in this one and the parts. So the supply chain out there seems to be dragging down a lot of these projects. So when you look at a timeline that you're given today, and that's something that a vendor is telling you, that's their best picture because they want to make that sale. They don't know when they'll actually get some of these parts for that elevator. That's my belief at this point. That's
Okay.
what we're seeing out there. So I don't know how DPS would feel about something that we can't get done relatively quickly, because I like the initial timeline, but I'm not sure we can meet that.
The timeline is about twice of what it would have been 2 years ago. We had this discussion about lead time and materials, so they've already, and they've doubled their time. We would not begin construction on that elevator until all the components were here. So I would not allow them to take the elevator down and start construction till they gave me assurances that they had absolutely everything they needed on hand, because we don't want to take the elevator down and all of a sudden we can't get one of the components and the elevator's down for 3 months. That's just not tolerable. So,
Okay. And I want to go back a little bit to that parking issue.
Okay.
Because in my head, I forgot to ask this question. We're not talking just about the ones that are going to take their driving test. We're talking about the ones that may be taking their permit test too. Is that correct?
Correct.
And so those people wouldn't be included in these, or they in my mind, they will be included in the parking future of our lots, because those people could come more en masse than the ones that are behind the wheel test.
Correct.
So we're setting aside a parking space for the behind the wheel test, but we're not necessarily designating anything for these younger kids or parents that bring them down here for their permit test.
No, we would require them to park across the street.
Okay,
There would be one spot available, period, for parking out here.
I like your positivity. I'm not sure it'll work out, but
Well, I guess we're going to have.
we have
to
a
fig-
sheriff, Hill, that I'm
We
sure
do,
he'll
and
patrol
he
that
ha-
parking
he-
lot with
They have coupon books over there that they can hand out coupons.
coupon books, okay.
Mr. Chair, John, how much would DPS generate?
Pardon me?
How much would DPS generate in revenue a year?
About $13,500 a year for that suite.
Okay, so it's, it's a long payback if you just think about DPS's revenue and how much this elevator is. That's a long payback. I do agree with John, however. These elevators are inspected every single year by the state, and they certify them as either acceptable or unacceptable. It's similar to the jail. They will tell us when that elevator needs to be replaced. I don't know what the timelines generally are, but I am familiar with what John is saying, that at some point in time, we'll be forced to replace the elevator.
What, off subject a little bit, but what about the elevator in this building? How old is that?
Which elevator?
In this building here?
This elevator was upgraded in the 80s.
Okay,
So we have a ways to go here. The next elevator that we're going to have to talk about in a couple years will be the sheriff's office elevator. So,
Mr. Chair, and just one thing, as John mentioned, the elevator modernization is in the CIP for 2023. So we're really only talking about accelerating it 1 year. And as Commissioner Franzine said, I relate that elevator to the clown shaft in a haunted house, because if you can survive it, you're probably in a good point. That one is one that I feel like is not the best representation of what we want our facilities to be reflective to the public who chooses to use that elevator. So while we are accelerating it by a year in our plan, it is absolutely something that we want to get accomplished before the inspectors tell us it's time to fix. Because if they haven't said that already, their standards are high, don't get me wrong, but that elevator needs a facelift badly.
Okay.
Well, and I look at this, and I appreciate your point about the payback period, but we're going to have to do this project regardless of whether we have a lease or lesser down in the, that lower level. So it doesn't matter to me which one I separate the two issues. They aren't one dependent on the other in my mind. I think we have somebody who's interested in that space. I think we should move forward with that. I also think that we need to make sure that the Department of Labor doesn't come in and decide that our elevator is shot tomorrow and we have to do it. So I think we should do that myself. We would move that forward.
I'd agree.
A lot of yeses up here today.
We can
So, well,
add-
one other thing. Is there another chapter to this story?
no, those two chapters, that's it, sir. Yep.
Okay. All right.
We can add this to 2022 CIP listing before we do the final approval in December. We are at $3.8 million in CIP expenses, but we do have substantial fund balance in Fund 43. We're at $2.5 million at the beginning of 2021. Because we were planful and thinking COVID was going to still impact us, we restricted how much we did for CIP this year. So we'll add another $2 million in fund balance, estimated $2 million in fund balance for the end of '21. So we should have a fund balance around $4 million available to us, so we can easily absorb this in fund balance usage for 2022 without doing anything to the levy.
And what do you think the target is for fund balance usage in Fund 43?
By policy, our balance should be 2.2 million or higher,
Okay.
is our policy.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
All right, and continuing with our business managers coming in and giving you updates on their individual departments' budgetary performance. We do have Jessica here with Land Services, that will go through her presentation once I pull it up.
Welcome, Jessica.
Nice.
Oh, yeah, you are matching.
Got the message today, huh?
What's with the rest of you accounting types? What? Get the memo?
I only shared it with her.
And Kara. Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. I'll let Nick get the presentation pulled up here. But I'm here to just give you a little more in-depth look than Nick brings to you every month on our land services budgets. This is as of the end of October.
Oops, sorry. Access to your notes.
All right, the first slide here is showing you our land services levy revenue as of the end of October. As you've heard in the last few months' meetings, we are ahead of our revenue projections by 137%, or just over $385,000. This is mostly due to our permits and variance applications. Our variance applications are up 183%. Our land use permits are up 140%, and our septic permits are up 160%. Charges for services, this is where those recorder fees, document recording fees you've heard about are. They are up 153%, as well as just our general vital records, our birth, death, marriage certificates, they are up 129%. Our E911 addressing fees, that kind of goes along with permits and new buildings, they are up 216%. And then in our miscellaneous revenue, we are up 282%. This is mostly due to copy fees, so as the document recording numbers go up, there's more copies that are printed and charged for, so that's the main driver there. And just a little deeper look at just our document numbers and our permit numbers. For documents recorded, we have a 112% increase from 2020 in recorded documents, just year to date. So this graph below just kind of shows how many documents have been recorded. So 2019 and 2020 are for the full year, and 2021 is just as of the end of October. So you can see we're already just over 2,000 documents ahead of where we were at the end of the year last year. And our documents in queue were at a 201% increase. For the permits, I double-checked this like 3 times. It's also a 112% increase from 2020 in our number of permits approved, and that's the orange bar on the right. And then our permits applied for is the blue bar, and there's a 111% increase in permits that have been applied for in 2021. For levy expenses, we are just under budget.
Jessica, if I can, what's this telling you when you look at this?
That we're very busy.
Yeah, I mean,
That they kind of go hand in hand. Depending on the permit, there's new buildings, so that's recording documents. So a lot of it is related. It just, to me, it shows that the pandemic isn't affecting a lot of our work in our department. It's actually increasing it.
do you see a plateau coming?
I hope so.
Okay.
I feel like, yes, I think it's going to settle down. It's been increasing for the last almost 2 years now, but I feel like it has to. There's only so much land to build on also, so.
Wow. Okay, thank you.
I don't know if you have an answer to this question, but month over month, looking at 2021, is it still going up, or is it starting to level off?
For the recorded documents, I'm pretty sure, I'm not 100% sure, but I think they're still going up. As far as permits, it is starting to level off and get closer to last year's.
Okay.
All right, then our expenses on the levy side, like I said, we're just under budget. This graph makes it look like it's under budget more than it is, but we're about $36,000 under budget. A little bit of that is due to personnel, so replacement staffing, turnaround time. Services and charges, our postage charges are up a little bit due to the increased cost of postage and we're just sending a lot more items out since COVID has started. A lot more people are doing things by mail. Our consulting fees, you've heard about that a little bit every month due to an enforcement case that we have going on. Our publications, we're only at 67%, and we just haven't been doing as many advertisings as we used to. We're just seeing a little more savings there. Our professional and tech fees are up by 126%. This is mostly due to our septic inspection and design review costs, because we outsource that. This should decrease in the coming years as we get more staff certified in-house. We just had one become certified, so we should have more in-house staff able to do these reviews and inspections, so that should decrease. Trainings were up 126%. A lot of this is still catch-up on trainings that weren't offered last year. And then under supplies and materials, we're at 114% of budget. We're under budget at 80% for office supplies, and we're at 159% for our gasoline, diesel, and other fuels. This is mostly for the fuel in our county vehicles for staff to go do site visits. If there's more permits, there's more site visits, so our mileage and fuel costs are going to be higher. All right, so this is our non-levy revenue. So this includes our Fund 2 restricted and committed funds, so our recorder tech funds, AIS, and water planning, as well as Fund 20, which is our tax forfeited and resource development funds. Fund 18, which is our solid waste non-landfill fund, and Fund 50, which is our landfill fund. So that's all grouped in here. We are at 166.13% of budget, or $2.8 million over budget. The first item is our recreation fund revenue from our tax forfeited settlement from last year was 217% of budget. So we budgeted $50,000 revenue in our rec fund, and we actually received just over $108,000. Our charges for services, our recording fees come into play again because of that recorder tech fund. They're at 136%. Our charges for services are at 1,776%. The reason this is so high is our AIS expanded coverage requests. When they pay us, that goes in, when we bill them to cover their landings on like Monday through Thursday typically, they want extra coverage. That goes into our revenue in AIS because we bill them for that. But we never budget an amount because we don't really have any idea in June what they're going to request for the following year. So that number is budgeted at 0. We could look at potentially guessing from prior years and putting that number in there for future years so we don't have as big a variance. Investments is at 451% of budget. This is mostly driven by the interest on tax forfeited properties that people buy on contract. So as you know, we've had a record year of land sales, so this number is increased because there's more people buying on contract as well. So we're about $87,000 over budget there. Our miscellaneous, we're at 420% of budget there. This also is due to the sale of tax forfeited property. We're at 438% of our budget there. Our total property sales revenue, we're just over $2.2 million so far this year. And if we look at it, we're about a 50-50 split of those that buy on contract versus with cash. There is more revenue that goes into here than just the sale of the property itself. There's timber and a couple other items. People buying on contract is a little higher at about $833,000, and those that bought land with cash are just over $800,000, so it's right about 50-50. And then, just to compare, last year, in 2020, we were just over $2 million in sales for the whole year, and as of October 31st, we're at $2.6 million in tax forfeited sales. So we're quite a bit ahead already. And then our total non-levy expenses, we are a little bit over budget, 118% of budget, or $920,000 over. Some of this is due to personnel services, so our retiree health, we're at 159%. This is just due to when people are leaving us and what accounts their salaries have been paid out of. And then our unemployment charges are at 206%. This is mostly due to AIS again. We budgeted about $8,000 for unemployment. We've never had unemployment charges. This was our first year trying to make our best guess. And we are charged, we have been charged so far just under $17,000. So we're a little over double what we thought. So at least we have something more to go off of for next year. And then services and charges, we're a little bit under budget, about 93% of budget. Our credit card fees are at 161%. This is our countywide credit card fees that go to our Recorder Tech Fund. And then also out at the landfill, there's credit card fees that we pay out there as well. Training, we're down a little bit, 64%. In some of these areas, there's a lot of classes that are offered online, either for free or reduced costs, so we see a savings there. Supplies and materials, our building and maintenance supplies is up to 227% of budget. Most of this is due to propane and some repairs we did to our heater out at solid waste, so it's in that solid waste fund. And then our ag-related supplies, we see a savings, we're only at 47%. This is mostly due to a reduced cost for our sowing trees that we plant on our tax forfeited land. And then capital outlay, we're at 110.5% of budget. This is due to our landfill construction project. We're over budget there. That's at building acquisition and improvements at 250%. We've just had a couple change orders, things that have come up and that they've needed to fix, so we've had those change orders in there. Furniture and equipment, we haven't purchased as much as we thought we were going to have to, so we're down, we're only at 21% of budget. And then in these other expenditures, our tax forfeited settlement is at 197% of budget. This is kind of a pass-through account, so when we do the settlement, the funds go in there and then we send it out to the city schools. So we budgeted $550,000, but because we had a great year in 2020 as well, we actually settled just over $1 million. So that shows as a over budget amount there. And that's all I have. Do you have any questions?
One question for you, going back on the charges for services where we're 1,776% over because we only recognize the revenue.
Yes.
Where do the expenses show up?
In the payroll, personnel.
In the payroll personnel? Okay.
I have a question about unemployment.
Yep.
These AIS people are hired for the summer, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why don't we keep them under the 67 days so we don't have unemployment?
I've been working with HR trying to figure out exactly how all that works, what we can do. I know they've also been working more on when they file unemployment. They're coming to us and asking us questions. We've had a few that we were terminated this year, so we made sure that unemployment knew that they were terminated. And it's just one thing we're looking at. We're going to look a lot more closely when we do next year's plan to plan for the unemployment, and are they eligible to receive it? They know they're temporary employees, so.
The state makes that determination on whether they qualify for unemployment or not. We have, over the past few years, taken a much more aggressive stance with unemployment, trying to fight some of them off if we don't feel that they're qualified. We have tried with AIS to push back a little bit, and so far have been unsuccessful in pushing those off. Because we make the same argument that they were hired as a temporary position, they're only here for the summer months, it's very part-time, and
And they knew
the
that
state,
when they started.
and the state doesn't
No
seem to
sense to
really
me.
care about our position on that one. Oh, Gary's got his hand raised.
Well, I just wanted to comment to Rosemary that we easily could keep somebody under 67 days. The problem this year was we were 25 inspectors short of what we wanted. So if we would have cut people loose at 67 days to ensure no unemployment, we would have had a bigger mess than what we had to pay in the unemployment. I hope that makes sense, but we were greatly understaffed trying to find people this season.
I think that's the problem, and I've also tried to contest unemployment cases before. I could tell you some horror stories, but I'll spare that because we're broadcasting. Fighting unemployment is a tough, tough, tough battle. And so I'm not surprised we lost. The 67-day rule, if we had plenty of bodies behind it, then we could do that. And if the labor market changes, we should consider doing that to avoid the expense. That said, in the current labor market, we really didn't have much choice. You could consider contracting the work back out. That is a function of which one is a better financial return for us. I think even with the unemployment, it's still going to be considerably cheaper for us to have hired our own than to have used a contractor because the markup on a contractor is so high. I think. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I did reach out to kind of see what our costs would be if we did contract everything back out besides the kind of coordinator that we have in-house. And we still would be, I don't have the numbers in front of me, it was still cheaper even with the unemployment costs to keep it in-house. I want to say it was about a $6 to $9 per hour charge that we would get from them compared to what we pay. So it's still a savings even with that high unemployment number, keeping it in-house.
Okay.
Good question.
Any other questions? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, next up. In the board meeting where we delegated the amount of dollars that we were going to utilize from ARPA towards the different buckets, one of those buckets was for usage on our own CIP plan. As finance team, we did go through and scrub the current CIP list for 2022 to see what we could find that would qualify or what we believe would qualify under current guidance. And read that list to you, and I should probably share it too so that it's up on the screen. I'll pull that up and I'll keep talking while I pull it up. Of the list that we have $1.93 million worth of existing CIP projects from 2022 that we believe would qualify. This does include the Courtroom 2, which is a multi-year program, so that's what makes up $1.065 million of that 1.9. So it is important to keep that in mind that it will only have a $410,000 positive impact to basically fund balance for 2022, but long-term it will build just over $1 million worth of fund balance for us by doing this. Each one of these is placed into the particular category that we feel it would fall under. For Courtroom 2, we believe it fits under category 1.4, which is prevention in congregate settings. Because this courtroom can be utilized to allow for spacing for individuals during the pandemic or during any other outbreak that we may have, we feel this helps in that prevention for a congregate setting, especially with it attached to the jail, to try and minimize the amount of interaction that occurs there. This is all based on current guidance. This could change. Right now, there's 66 different categories that we can place everything into, and the reporting requirements that we have in front of us that have those 66 categories no longer is available to us to review. They did push back our reporting period to January 31st and remove the portal from our view while they modify some things and update pieces. There's also legislation going through that may change how some of this looks in the future, but based on current, that's where we're at with these.
Nick, if I could just interject. Wasn't there a ruling, though, that if we spent these dollars or obligated these dollars under whatever the rulings were at that moment, we'd be held harmless for a change down the road?
Yes, the legislation that's going through is actually going to make it more expansive. It's going to give us more opportunity to utilize the funds. The legislation that went through the Senate right now allows for $10 million worth of loss of revenue without having to do the actual calculation to determine if you qualify for that. With our current projections, we would not qualify for a loss of revenue. This would allow us to get $10 million that we could take towards loss of revenue, which can be used for any government services that we choose to use them for through 2024.
I think you're correct, Mr. Chair, that
And
if-
yes.
as long as we use the interim guidance, it will not later be held against us if the final guidance is to the contrary. That said, think about our process here. I think we're on kind of a January timeframe for your formal actions. We could take these actions anytime, but you've got your applications open for daycare. That's going to close in December. We're going to use the month of December probably to vet them. Same with broadband, same with the internal projects. We're trying to funnel this into board action for all of those things one time, probably in January. We may have guidance at that point. If it's more expansive, that'd be great. Then it'll just make it easier for us to do that. And if we can claim the lost revenue at 10 million, that's going to save a lot of staff time, frankly, trying to fit stuff into buckets. What Nick is talking about is it's a presumptive eligibility for lost revenue up to 10 million. What that means is no calculation. We get to assume we've lost 10 million in revenue. We're only getting 12. And so it would substantially change how we have to document the use of these funds. So I think that's the potential for that guidance because we won't act until January. But I'm not particularly concerned about it because I think Nick is accurate. It's probably going to be more expansive. That's what I'm hearing as well. No, I got no guarantees for you. So I think we're in good shape, is what I would say.
Okay.
So continuing on through the projects that we have identified here, the jail booking body scanner, we also feel that that will qualify in the exact same category, 1.4, for prevention in congregate settings, as they'll be able to take temperatures. We can use that as a tool to help catch potential COVID cases early. We also have the category of substance use services. This is allowing us to catch contraband and help individuals get help for their substance use by catching them in the act of bringing stuff into our jail. So we do feel this would qualify under ARPA and the current guidance that we have. EDMS document management system. This is a document management system in community services. We believe this would qualify under a few different categories, starting with 1.3 for contact tracing. It would allow us to actually document any contact tracing that we are doing and manage those, all the documents related to that in one system. We also have 1.10 for mental health services. Obviously, we do quite a bit of mental health services and community services. Managing the documents is part of that.
Nick, if I can just stop you for a second. I want to go back on the body scanner.
Yep.
And just for a quick question, and maybe Andy, you can handle this one, or we may have covered it when we discussed that issue under the CIP earlier, but what's the life expectancy of that machine? And I ask the question because at some point we'll have to replace it or upgrade it or do something. And ARPA funds are a one-off. We're just going to spend them one time, and then we will accept the responsibility for maintenance or replacement going forward.
My understanding, without the captain of the jail here, is it's at least a 5-year on the initial, and then it would probably require some maintenance beyond that, but that's the best answer I can give you right now. We can definitely find that out and get back to you.
And now that you say that, I think it comes with a 1-year warranty also.
Sounds
if I remember correctly now.
That sounds accurate.
So thanks for getting rid of my cobwebs for me. Appreciate it.
Well, we can definitely find that answer out and circle back on that, so.
Okay.
If I recall correctly, the lease term, if we were to lease one, would be 5 years. So that's kind of the expected life expectancy for the system. But like we discussed at the last budget committee meeting where we discussed or went through this, we don't normally only keep an asset for the term that its useful life is set out to be. We usually keep 7, 8, 9 years. We are notorious for trying to push well beyond. As long as that investment to repair or maintain it is lower than replacement costs, we'll continue to maintain beyond that life expectancy.
Okay, thank you.
And Andy, if you can circle back, we think it might have been 7. I don't know. We're kind of sitting here trying to clear cobwebs too and thinking it was somewhere between 5 and 7.
I think it had a 2 or 3 year warranty.
Maybe it was a 2-year warranty and a 5-year.
It was a 2-year or 3-year warranty originally.
Thank you. I'm sorry to
Oh, no.
backtrack here.
We'll circle back and get you more information on it. Continuing on, we believe Category 1.11, substance use services, and Category 1.12 for other public health services. Ultimately, because we have so many categories where we believe this would fit into, I think it's pretty safe to say this one is very easily covered by ARPA funds. The budgeting software, we are, in the current CIP, we do have budgeting software set up for us to get for the county-wide system. The current Munis system does not do a phenomenal job of budgeting. It allows us to enter, it allows us to dump information out, but it is very short in its capabilities to do any forward analysis, any long-term planning, any true reporting out of the system. Everything needs to be dumped out to Excel and modified in order to report it to you. This would allow us to pull all that together. We believe that it falls under 7.2 evaluation and data analysis, where we can utilize this software to actually track the expenses towards ARPA within the system and report out from here in a much better fashion than what Munis allows us to do. For Munis, it would be pulling everything by hand, putting it together. We can actually program this to pull that data together for us and just do a one-time dump. We can also create dashboards from this that would allow you access to see how we're performing in each one of these areas, specifically for COVID, but we can expand that out into all of our different funds where you can see our performance at any point in time. So we believe this falls under 7.2 for ARPA. The last item that we were able to pull from the existing plan is the jail ductwork cleaning. We believe this falls under category 1.4, prevention in congregate settings. It is to improve the airflow and the air handling within the jail, so we believe this would qualify in that category. Those are the items that we have thus far. We continue to look at guidance and try and pull in more items as we go. And we will do this in 22, we'll do this in 23, all the way through the end of the term, unless dollars are spent, then we'll stop. But we'll continue to look at what we have to make sure that we are utilizing these funds appropriately and to their fullest extent.
If we claim ARPA funds for these projects in the CIP, then it generates fund balance because it frees up the levy resource that you otherwise would have paid, and so it falls through as fund balance growth. So think about this as $2 million in fund balance growth. We, Nick and I have had conversations, and Debbie, about what's the target? I think too much is bad, and I think too little is bad. So what are we trying to hit? We're going to wait till we close out this fiscal year because I think we're going to have contributions to fund balance there. And then early in the year, I've asked Nick to bring you an analysis at the Budget Committee, January, February-ish, depends on when the year closes out, about where are we sitting on fund balances in each of our various funds and how close are we to target, policy targets in each of those funds. So we can really have a good understanding of how far away are we from where we want to be. Because we've been making more rapid progress than we expected to. So that's a good thing. Here's an example.
Okay.
We would bring this list to you for approval along with all of the other ARPA stuff probably in January, if that's okay. Are we on that? Is that okay with you guys?
Tim, what's the benefit of waiting till January?
There are some reporting requirements that we can avoid for 2020. If we bring this to you in December, then we have 2 fiscal years of a single audit at the federal level. If we push it off into 1 year, we can get by with 1 year of a single audit. It's the level of scrutiny in your audit, and so it will save us money. And since we were in December, we thought, yeah, just tip it over. And we got a deadline of December 3rd. You guys have to vet those projects. The earliest we could get it on your agenda was December 28th anyway. So we figured, all right, 5 days, throw it into the next year.
And
So-
again, these are all projects that were included in the CIP already, so the planning has already begun for these. We're not going to be shortening the window or delaying anything by waiting till January for the approval of the projects versus And technically, they'll be approved in December, when you approve the budget and levy in the CIP plan. The approval of ARPA will just happen in January. That's the only piece that would be different.
So approving the use of ARPA dollars for this will not slow down progress on any of these CIP projects. You'll be approving the projects on December 14th. You'll be approving the use of ARPA funds to fund those projects in January.
Which we're reflecting fund balance bill in 22.
Right.
But in December, you should, would you have the green light to go ahead and place orders for POs for some of these?
Yep.
Yep.
Because they're part of our existing CIP, once the final budget is approved, they have authorization to go forward. The biggest thing for us is it avoids about a $6,800 expense for a single audit if we push this till January approval.
That works.
Very good. Let's move on to 2022 fee, costing and schedule review.
So last year, staff did do a full costing analysis of all the fees. They do review fee schedules every single year, and this is our opportunity to look through them and then push them forward for approval and for public hearing at the end of December here. So starting out, we're going to start in financial services. Financial services, we are proposing to increase the commercial pesticide applicator fee. And I'll pull this up so it's up on the screen. Too many documents in here that, or she can just cheat. Pull it up faster than I can. Is increasing from $119 to $139. Of that, $64 is mandated that goes, or in statute, to go to the state. The remaining portion is to cover our costs. In the last couple of years, we've seen the amount of time dedicated to proctoring these exams increase, especially over the last year. We also had a significant increase in the number of exams that ran through this office. It is handled by Tracy Giza down in the Extension office, who is part of the Administrative Services team. So we are looking to move from $55 to $75 for our portion, which drives it up to $139. Our cost, just in staff time to proctor these, is about $69. So we're trying to cover our costs on this. And we did look at surrounding counties. The only one that responded back to us was Morrison County. They are at $75 on their portion.
How many of these do you process?
I don't recall. Do you remember? 85?
95?
85 this last year,
Okay,
which was almost double. Almost double the prior year.
okay.
So, any questions on that one?
Any anticipation that the state will raise their portion?
Not at this point, but the state could change their mind at any point in time. Next on our list is land services. There are a number of changes being proposed within land services. We'll start at the beginning, and if you have any questions, Gary's on here and Jessica's with us, so they can help answer any questions you have. Under customer service, they are adding a $9 charge for marriage certificate of no record found. And go ahead and jump in if you have questions at any point in time. I don't have tons of explanation behind these, so we'll have to rely on them.
What's the existing fee for that? You're adding $9 to,
Do you want to explain?
Yeah, there's no fee currently.
oh, okay.
This is a new
It costs
charge.
us $5 when we do these, plus staff time.
Okay.
Okay. Jumping into assessing services, they're proposing to remove the proposed TIF project. I don't know if you want to explain that one a little bit, Gary.
It's taken care of later on in the fee schedule. We do have a TIF. I don't have my note, I don't know where it's at, but Jessica, if you have our note, it's in there somewhere else in the fee schedule, so it was somewhat redundant.
Yes, I think when all the fee schedules were combined, when the offices were combined over in land services, it just was duplicated on there, so it's about 5 or 6 more lines down. The same fee, $300, is listed on there, so it's just removing that duplication.
Next up is removed the wording under tax research, prior to 1997 payable year, and non-owner, and added prior to 1997 payable year. The charge is per parcel per year. Jessica, you want to just come sit up here and go through them, so we can explain them? You have a better explanation of all these than I do.
Okay, on the removed wording under tax research, yeah, we just had some extra wording on there that actually made it very confusing. It said prior to 1997 payable year, per year up to 10 parcels, $1 each, additional parcel per year where information available. So just a lot of extra wording, so we just changed it to simplify it to say prior to 1997 payable year, this $10 charge is per parcel per year. Under environmental services, just kind of combined a couple of things, changed the title there to just say firewood permit, so it's just a little wording change. And then we removed the copy of the forest management plan. We used to have nice binded copies that we made, had printed, available for people to purchase for $25. We no longer have any copies of those, and the plan is available on our website as a PDF. And if someone were to come in and want us to print it, we would just charge them the per copy page fee that we charge for anything else. And then the forfeited parcels research fees for one parcel and additional parcel. We don't go by this fee. We're not currently charging by these fees. We use the $25 per hour fee from the above special research projects and the $10 certified copy fee that is further up in the fee schedule. And then under land use permits, we added a fee for conversion to guest cottage. This has been happening. People have been converting their garages and other items to guest cottages, and we've just been using, I don't remember which fee exactly, but one of the other permit fees for square footage. So we just wanted to add a line on here to capture this because it's happening so often. Trying to see. Yeah, we've just been putting it under new construction residential, up to 1,000 square foot ground cover, using that permit fee. So we just wanted to pull it out, have its own fee, just because of how often it's happening, and to capture how many of those we are receiving. And then we added a section for miscellaneous permit fees. We want to add a new fee for all permit applications on riparian parcels. And the reason for this is, the fee would be $100. And this would be for all like building permits that are located on riparian parcels. And the reason for this is the amount of time it takes to review and approve permits that are on those riparian parcels compared to others. We're not capturing the increased time due to bluff analysis, FEMA floodplain rules that were brand new a couple years ago, slopes, vegetation, and dirt moving. Sometimes they have to do a lot of research on the historical variances, CUPs, and existing legal nonconformities for permits on those parcels. And then we also have time and fuel resources spent having to do follow-ups on permits that are in those parcels. So we're not capturing a lot of the extra time that it takes for permits that are applied for in riparian parcels. And then we added another fee for scheduled site visit requested without a permit application. From my understanding, this is a homeowner or a real estate agent will call and ask if we can go out to the site because someone wants to buy this house and maybe build something there. Is that possible? So we'll go out, review it, say, yes, that is possible. They can do that. So this is capturing our time and fuel and other resources to go out and do those site visits without a permit being applied for. Both Cass and Aiken County charge for this fee, or charge for this service as well. Theirs are also $100, and that's what we're requesting ours to be at, is $100.
Does Bill request that a lot?
Yeah, I think it's mostly Bill, yeah.
Mostly Bill? Okay. Since Commissioner Coring isn't here, I have to speak for him.
He's
He's
here.
on.
He's on.
But he's not speaking. Just covering all the bases here.
And then in our fee schedule, we had manufactured home movers license. We have not issued any of those in our department, so I reached out to Nancy at the highway, and they do issue permits for people that have to move larger, oversized objects. So we just are removing that from the land services fee schedule. And then under the Planning Commission Board of Adjustment, so we've always had the conditional use permit on here. We're just breaking it out and adding wording so that it says residential conditional use permit is the $500 fee that's always been there. And then adding a line for an amendment to a residential conditional use permit is the same $500 fee. And then breaking out the fee for the commercial conditional use permit, which was always there and we've always charged it, it just wasn't broken out on here. So that's $750, and adding that same line to say amendment to a commercial conditional use permit for $750 as well. And then under land use applications, we had a fee on here that was called independent plat check fee, and it was just kind of confusing as to what that was. So I worked with Jake, and it doesn't sound like it happens very often, very, very rarely. But we're changing it to be called outside jurisdiction plat review fee. So this is for us to review plats that are not in our jurisdiction, kind of as a third party. Someone, I think he said maybe like a township that we don't do permitting for wants us to review a plat or something like that, is what it sounds like that is for. I feel like we've done very few, if any, within the last few years. But just clearing up what that fee actually was. And then under solid waste, we want to increase the tires with no rims, the smallest tire, and the most common tire we take in out at the landfill from $1 to $2, just to cover our increased costs for hauling those fees and getting them shredded. And then under the oil antifreeze and battery disposal, just kind of changing the title there, lumping some more things into one category, kind of an automotive category. We had a charge on here for $1 per gallon for antifreeze and 50 cents per oil filter. They were not charging this at the landfill because we have multiple sites throughout the county people can bring this stuff to that are not manned, and it's not charged, so they weren't charging it at the landfill because why would they charge it there and nowhere else? So we just want to change that to be a free disposal for them. Oh, we do have a lot. Under miscellaneous fees at the landfill, the propane tanks, we want to increase the small propane tank from 5 to 7, the large tank from 10 to 15. Because there is more work needed on these tanks now, we have to take the valve off and make sure that they're empty. And I believe there's something else that we never had to do before they were disposed of. And then again with our TVs, increasing the cost on the two sizes. The smaller TVs that were 5 increased to 10, and then the 28-inch or larger, they were $10. We want to increase that to 15. And that is, again, just to cover our costs. The costs of recycling our electronics are increasing greatly. And then there's a few just wording changes. A lot of the solid waste fee schedule was just a bunch of paragraphs. You'd have to read a paragraph to find the fee. So I just broke it out to be more line by line like the rest of the county fee schedule. On compost disposal, we had to break this out because there was some confusion out there. So for a resident to bring in brush, leaves, and garden waste, it is free. It is a free charge, or free service. For commercial businesses to bring in that same brush, leaves, and garden waste, they do charge $5 per yard. And then the stumps is not a new fee, but just breaking that out, and that's determined by size. And then under our recycled electronics, we mentioned in here that we do the 2 business electronics events every year. We had a fee in there that listed 30 cents per pound. Well, as with everything else, we've seen increased costs. That actually changed. It went up 5 cents per pound for our September event. So we didn't want to call out the cost in our fee schedule because it could vary by event. And we do send emails and press releases out stating that amount before each event, so they will get that price anyways. And then under the last section, the household hazardous waste, we just updated the wording because we are now open Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. We're not doing the second weekend, second Saturday, second Wednesday anymore. We're just open Monday to Friday, 8 to 5. Then that's it.
Questions? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, continuing on through the list of fee changes. Information services, GIS, for all of our GIS charges, there is no recommended change at this point in time. Any questions on GIS? Okay. Under the sheriff's office, they are removing the alarm fees because they respond to alarms regardless of whether the person is paying the fee or not. They are electing to withdraw having this charge out there. There are so many residential people that have alarm systems now that will ultimately contact 911 regardless of whether the fee is paid or not. They didn't feel that this was a necessary piece anymore. They are also increasing the mortgage foreclosure sale from 65 to 75. Dan, do you have a little bit of explanation of that one?
Yeah, with that one, it actually is same with as far as the labor intensive purposes, it's the same as the civil service fees, and right now we're at 75 with that one. And we called around, and I know Cass County for sure was at 75 with that same particular fee, so we went with that.
Okay.
No questions on that. Awesome. For community services, they did request to add domestic abuse treatment fee, which was going to be a fee based on income. At this point, because they are still negotiating and still working through some back-end issues, they'd like to withdraw adding this to their fee schedule for 2022 as they navigate through what that actual cost is going to look like. There was grant funding available to us to help pay for some of these costs. That is coming to an end. So as they get through the end of that period and actually figure out what our costs are, we'll probably approach this in 2023's fee schedule.
Okay.
For highway, Nancy, if you want to come up and talk about yours.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, Commissioners.
Good morning.
So for highway, we have a few revisions to the fee schedule. We'll start with the moving permits. When we did our costing analysis to look at staff time and equipment utilized for the process, our costing amount came to just over $98, thus the reason for the increase from $70 to $100. Then for our single one-time moving permit, the same thing. We looked at the costing analysis, again, for staff time and equipment costs, and that came to just over $29, thus the reason for our increase to from $15 to $30. Entrance permits. So our costing analysis for this, including the different reviews that we have to do on site with our staff, the total costing amount came to just over $341. That did not include any culvert costs. So we try to look at the average culvert costs that would be incurred for the different types of entrance permits that we have, whether it's a residential or commercial. And so we're proposing to increase the permit to $400 and then increasing the deposit to $500. We're also seeing that we're having concerns with customers not completing the permit in a timely manner. So we have some permits still out there in our system from 2018. So that's the reason for us increasing the deposit or having the deposit be a little bit more than the permit to try to urge those customers to get those entrance permits completed within a year. We did also reach out to the counties within District 3 to look at their fee schedules for all of the costs that we have before you today to make sure we weren't out of alignment with what they're charging, and we are in alignment with what they're charging for their fees as well. So again, the residential entrance permit, we're proposing a $100 increase in the permit itself and a $200 increase in the deposit. And then on the commercial side, we're proposing the permit fee to remain the same and then to increase that deposit by $100.
If they don't meet their timeline for completion, and you said that's 1 year?
Right.
They lose their deposit?
That is in the policy that they forfeit their deposit. Unfortunately, there are still some hanging out there from 2018, so we're trying to clean up that process and make sure that, we've sent correspondence out in February, I believe, or earlier this year to urge those customers to get this taken care of. We now have to go through the process to make sure that we have everything in place to forfeit those funds.
So the mission is to get these entrances completed. Will raising the fee accomplish that?
That's what we're hoping. When I looked back at the fee schedule for the highway department, another thing is that I noticed is we haven't increased our fees for at least the last 3 years, and costs continue to rise. So we thought now is the time to start incrementally increasing those costs to meet the needs that our costing analysis is showing.
Are there any other strategies, and this will be more for Tim, that could be utilized to up the completion rate?
Mr. Chairman, board members, we did have a really good, robust discussion about this when we looked through all these fee schedules. It's kind of like, as it relates to the deposit part, it's kind of like porridge. You want it just right. You don't want to be too low that the people just walk away and don't comply and finish the permit, make sure it doesn't erode away and create a hazard. And you don't want it too hot or too expensive, so they're doing them in the middle of the night and don't even come to seek a permit. And so we had a good discussion about that. We felt that the numbers that we're providing here represent that. Did that answer your question?
Yes. I mean, it's hard to come up with another strategy.
It is.
Financial penalty is probably the most effective in this case.
It is also really difficult. Nancy mentioned that we've had a few out there from 2018, and that's concerning to us too, and to the finance staff about these. I think it's $20,000 we have in this account, and although our policy is to, after a year, go fix them and do them ourselves or assess the property owner, we're not very good at that, and it's not a really good reflection on us. So we're trying to do it this way to try to compel them rather than keep the money, even though it says it in the policy, because that $600 honestly it's going to be very difficult in some cases for us to go out and restore them. So we're just continuing to work with the property owners and be almost too nice. We're trying to figure out a way so they comply rather than we have to come in with a heavy hand.
No chance that we would go in and do it, force it and then put it on the tax rolls.
I think we have not gone down that route. We talked about that, and the process to assess somebody on their taxes is I don't know, that costs money too, and there's
right.
Sometimes it's a whole year delay and things like that. So it is one of our challenges.
So they lose their refund, but they don't lose their permit. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, so they could hold that permit unless we somehow figure out a way to encourage them to complete it. They could hold it for a long period of time.
The permit
is what I'm hearing, because you're going back to 2018. Mm-hmm. Enforcement is tough.
It is very difficult. It's that balance between getting what we need and then also treating the customer right. It's just one of those things. It's very hard to come in.
Well, it's interesting
as
that
property owners.
They would apply for a permit and have a deposit that they may lose and not want to complete the project themselves. That seems irrational from their perspective, but
that's why we need it just right, so they're compelled to come in and finish it. For me, I'd come running and for $500. In other cases, it's not enough. They just let it go. And
okay. Thank you.
Then we're proposing a $10 increase for mailbox support and installation on a county road. Again, our analysis is showing the need for that increase while also taking into consideration the benefits that provides to our county road system and our snowplow operators. For specific service signs, we just added the wording new behind that for that $400 fee. There was no change there. However, we did add another category below that for replacements of specific service lines, and we have that earmarked for $300. All other fees on our fee schedule remain the same.
Questions?
Thank you.
The only one that throws questions out there. Thank you.
So with these fee schedules, it does require a public hearing. We do have this planned for the December 28th meeting, is when this will come before you for that public hearing and approval.
Okay.
Jumping into financial policy review. I can pull these up. I don't have these ready. For asset management policy, we are proposing to add the capitalization threshold for assets purchased through federal funds. This is one that was recommended to us by the auditors based on the uniform grant guidance from the federal government. So this is a change of just leaving it at $15,000 to adding in, if purchased with federal funds, the initial individual cost of $5,000 will trigger us to capitalize that asset. Other than that, that is the only change that we have for the asset management policy. Any questions on asset management policy?
Nope, I don't believe so.
Okay. Next up. Next is our credit card policy. We do have a few changes that occur in this one. We are requesting to add language regarding the use of purchasing cards for business expenses when other procurement methods are not available. What the current policy has is a reference back to our personnel manual, which only talks about utilizing the P cards for travel expenses and related training and conference expenses. We have been utilizing the credit card for a little bit more than that in instances where we can find a better price on something online. We've been using the P card to do that. So we felt that it was necessary for us to put in policy that that was an acceptable use of the credit card, keeping in mind that this does go through review from all of you as a board. Finance is also very involved in reviewing this. We have staff that looks at almost every single one of these receipts every single month. And then we actually do an audit every quarter where we go through and make sure everything complies with not only our policies, but also tax and other issues that come up in that. Any questions or thoughts on us expanding that language a little bit here?
I would only encourage us to be very specific. I've seen those utilized in other places, and over time, the use gets expanded to whatever interpretation somebody might believe is available to them. So if we don't have to use them, we shouldn't use them. But if it's the only alternative, then yes, but very careful on watching
And
over
we
that.
couldn't agree any more than on that one.
All right.
We also are updating the language to reflect that the receipts must be original. This is just clarifying to make sure staff is very well aware that we need original receipts, not a copy or a statement from somebody. It needs to be that original receipt. We are also adding in language referencing the missing credit card documentation that is found on SharePoint, just pointing staff where that's at. If they are missing a receipt, gives them a form that they have to complete to show us what the expense was, where they were, what the reasoning was behind it, why they lost the receipt, and a number of other pieces there. We also changed the language for the cardholder review within 10 days of the end of the cycle. It did have receipt of statement. Staff doesn't receive a statement. They have to log into the credit card management system and actually review their purchases there, print a statement, sign that. That goes to their supervisor, who then signs that, and then the entire packet comes over to finance for the final review and payment. This is just clarifying that as soon as that cycle ends, because Wells Fargo ended at the end of the month, Bremer ends, I believe it's on the 10th of the month. Just clarifying that it's at the end of a cycle.
Going back real quick, Dick, on the one about the P cards and the use of those, should somebody use it outside our rule? In the state system, they have a form called the 16A, which you get enough 16As under your belt, you could be fired. A couple of them will have your P card withdrawn. Do we have anything like that as a checks and balances on the use of those?
We don't have a form, but anytime that somebody goes outside of policy or guidance as a whole, we do reach out to their supervisor and inform them. We do reach out to that staff member to tell them what they did wrong. And then if they do, say, inadvertently spend or use the county card to buy a personal item off of Amazon, that is charged back to them. So they do have to repay us for that portion. I did look a little bit at what the state has for their procurement card policy. We probably, in the coming years, will probably adapt kind of towards what they have, being more specific on what can and cannot be used for. Just trying to incrementally progress into a little more clarification and restrictions within that P card.
The nice check that creates is that the next level up will have to justify the expenditure that the individual misspent or misused the P card for. So it really is a powerful tool to make sure that it is used properly. And I see Mr. Bray shaking his head, who was in the state system, so he's well aware of the 16A form and the threat that it brings to misuse of the P cards.
I have a note made. We'll look into that, and I'll have Corey dig too. Any other questions on credit card or thoughts? Okay, next up is enterprise risk. There it is. For the enterprise risk management policy, we are making some changes to the listing of the plans that are out there. The facility safety manual no longer exists. That was eliminated by facilities. They do reference now the county-wide safety manual. That is a joint effort between multiple departments to have a county-wide safety manual. So they do reference that. They also reference OSHA standards and other limitations that are placed on how they have to operate. So they didn't feel that the facility safety manual was necessary anymore, so we are removing that from here. We did also find that community services does have a safety guideline, so we added that in here as well. And then we also are proposing to change the review at least annually by the department to as frequently as established by the department or the individual that's responsible for their issuance. Many of these are reviewed annually, but they are not updated on that annual basis. So we wanted to leave a little bit of flexibility in there for each one of these committees to establish that within their plan of how often they're going to review them and how often updates need to be completed. So that's our proposal on that one.
Okay.
And that is everything for enterprise risk management policy. Any questions or thoughts there?
Nope.
They will come forward on a future consent agenda, and Nick will have the outlined changes just like this.
Yep, every one of these will come in there. For the fund balance policy, at this point, we don't feel that there's any need for revisions here. We did adjust the highways minimum fund balance the last time we reviewed this down to the 12%, based on how the cash flow goes through the department, especially with local option sales tax. So that was the last modification we did. And at this point, going through that policy, we didn't feel there was a need for any updates. Next is procurement.
Mr. Braid, you had something to say?
Not this time.
Okay, thank you.
That was the long
I just started the conversation with my staff about that, and it was after the fact that they reviewed this policy, so I might have some questions.
Okay.
The 12% is for their entire fund, so it includes local option sales tax. There's nothing specific to the levy-based side versus the local option sales-based side. So that was the point behind the 12%.
Okay.
For procurement policy, we are updating, if I can scroll down to it, that all contracts will be maintained by the department originating the contract. It did have in here that financial services was maintaining those. We honestly went through all of our documentation and could not find that we had any copies of many of the contracts that are out there beyond what was stored within TCM, which is within Munis, so it's our digital document management related to all the payments we make. So there are documentation out there. We want the originals to be maintained in the department. They're the ones that have the knowledge of what was in the contract, what the expectations are. They're the ones that are trying to enforce those contracts too. So we want them to maintain them. Doesn't mean that they shouldn't be sharing them with us. We should be aware of what's going on, but they maintain the documentation. We're also adding reference to the federal funded procurement checklist. This is a form that we are still developing, but will have available to staff on January 1st. This is just a checklist to make sure that staff is following the federal procurement requirements, to make sure that the vendor is actually vetted out, that they're looking at the SAMS system, which is a federal system that tracks if somebody's been debarred from being able to be qualified for a federal contract, that they're actually going out and researching that so that we are in compliance with the Uniform Federal Grant Guidance. And then we are modifying language in Section D. I'll take it way down here. Is this the one I want here? Subsection 1, from $150,000 to the simplified acquisition threshold. The federal government does change what that the simplified acquisition threshold is. And rather than having the policy call a specific dollar amount, we are trying to push towards referencing what the federal guidelines are, so that we go out to the federal guidelines and just follow their standard. Right now, I believe they're at $250,000 instead of $150,000. So we just want to be able to fluctuate and change with that and not have the dollar amount called out here. One item that I did not put into the summary, we are adding the debarment and suspension as stated in the uniform guidance. This is in reference back to that form that staff go through for the checklist to make sure that they are going out and making certain that a vendor is not debarred from a federal contract. If we were ever to find that someone was debarred, the federal government could require us to repay those funds, and then it would be our expense. So we want to make sure this is in policy so that we aren't running that risk of losing federal funds by not qualifying a vendor beforehand. Any questions or comments on procurement?
I'm not seeing any.
Okay. As Tim said, this will come in the next board meeting on consent for approval. Moving on to 2022 budget and CIP final discussions. Final levy and budget is on the schedule for December 14th. We will give our nice little presentation that finance gives, and then go for approval of the final levy as well as that final budget, which does include the CIP as well. There were a few items that we had left hanging open on the CIP. We were looking for a new quote on the asphalt for the cold storage facility, and then some further information on the jail body scanner. I know that the sheriff shared with Tim, and Tim shared with all of you a bunch of information that they got from, I believe it was Anoka County?
I think so.
On the jail body scanner. So these are the two items that are still hanging open that we kind of want to get some guidance on, whether you want them to stay in the CIP plan or if those need to be removed, so we can start prepping for that December 14th meeting. And Gallus is with us here to answer any questions you may have on either one of those. So open it up for that part.
I was encouraged to find that it might, or does qualify for ARPA. That's encouraging, and my only question was about the life expectancy of it, and apparently Chief Deputy Gallus has some updated information. He's been doing his research while we talking about other things, so go ahead.
Killing time. Let's see. Our Lieutenant Troy Schilling did some work while this meeting was going on, called the vendor that life expectancy is 7 to 10 years. And at that point, you'd have to consider either investing in fixes if those were available, or likely moving towards an actual replacement of the scanner at that point. So 7 to 10 years. But there are agencies out there, according to the vendor, that have 13-year-old devices that are still fully functional.
So that's a pretty good life expectancy out of
Yes.
technology like that.
And it's a 2-year warranty on the bid that I believe we received, so.
Okay, well, thank you very much for looking into that.
And then I know there was the request for an updated quote on the asphalt for cold storage and related pieces to that. I did hear that came in, the actual asphalt came in a little under what was anticipated. I believe we're at 40,000, but the addition of gutters and snow control, right?
Yeah, John and his staff actually went out there and got us bids for the asphalt, and then looking at the gutters and the snow stops as well too. The asphalt actually came in at 34,000. We originally had 40,000 in there for the CIP. But then the gutters, they got a quote, which was $2,972 for the gutters, and then the snow rails or snow stops came in at $71.28, so a grand total of $44,100. I know John had also had budgeted for snow stops out there for $5,000 for those. So with the asphalt and those snow stops, all combined, we had 45,000 in there as far as budgeted for the 2022 year, which we get the asphalt, the gutters, and the snow stops, all for what we had originally budgeted.
So the asphalt, that includes the class 5 underneath, or there's some class 5 there already, I would assume?
I don't know, John, you probably would be able to answer that. They did some looking at that as well.
Our crew did such a great job of putting that class 5 down that there is really no work to do. And so that's why that price came down from 40 to 34. That 34 also includes a contingency because we know asphalt follows oil, and we all know what that's doing. So there's about a $3,000 contingency in there.
Okay, so in the current class 5, though, there's no dips or anything to be concerned about?
Oh, they were very impressed with the work that our crew had done and how we had maintained that, and
So am I,
I think
by
they
the
can
way.
go right on top of it. So,
Okay, that's good news.
okay.
Questions, concerns about that project?
So from the four of you that are here, are you comfortable leaving both of those in the CIP for 2022?
The scanner on the blacktop.
Yeah, blacktop. And the gutters and the
Yep.
diverters, or whatever you call them up there on the roof?
They must be gold-plated, I think,
Only the finest.
I guess. Wow.
I'm not hearing anyone say no, so I would
Okay.
move forward with that.
We will leave those in the budget. Along with that, like I said, we are working on trying to get the final presentations put together and get the analysis on the impact to taxpayers. With that, knowing whether we're going to remain at that 3.99 is very important, because if we change that at all, that does impact all the analysis that we have to accomplish. So we're kind of looking for guidance on whether we intend to stay at the 3.99 and the current that we have for the preliminary levy, or if there's interest in making any modifications to that.
I'll speak as one. I'm committed to the 3.99 myself. Others?
Well, I have expressed some opinion to share some of that with the taxpayers. But I'll leave it at that. I was, I guess, looking at possibly a decrease to 3.5, but I guess I don't know what that all looks like. If we were to back out enough to drop that to 3.5, what that means fund balance related to. So I don't know if that's something we could put together, or if you need an answer today, or just how that works. But
Were we going to get some additional information too on the savings in health, our healthcare?
That came into a zero, which did push down our expenses. So we do have capacity to absorb a decrease from the 399. We can go well below the 3.5 if we needed to, but as Doug pointed out, we are looking at fund balance rebuilds. We do have some fund balance rebuild programmed in already. This just helps us get that plan further down the line a little bit quicker. We did get the advantage with CARES to get some decent steps forward, and this would just help us. And on top of that, any adjustment you make to the 399 this year does have an outgoing impact to us. The inflation rates and costs that we anticipate based on our normal growth are pretty steady. So if we drop a 3.5 this year, we may have to come into a higher rate next year, a 4.5 or a 5, in order to absorb that increase in health insurance in the coming years. So if we stay at 399, this gives us capacity to kind of absorb that 6% in '23. It gives us a little more capacity for the 2024 8% growth in health insurance. Not that we're going to see that amount, but that is our cap, so it helps us in planning. So there are different pieces to that 399 versus a 3.5 that we have to look at outgoing years as well.
I think you can calculate that a half a point is probably roughly 150 to 200,000.
About 200,000, or about a little over 400,000 per percent.
So
Which in the scheme of things isn't a lot.
No. And we've really made some progress in the last year, 2 years coming down. I could support the 399.
I'm with Doug.
My rationale for my position, and I spoke quickly and I felt firmly, is that, you know, we're trying to rebuild that fund balance, and the quicker we can build that, because we're basically trying to be a pay-as-you-go county. And if we don't have those dollars sitting there in reserve, there will come a time when we will pay a price for that. But I think it's the responsible thing at this point to build that as quickly as we possibly can, so that we aren't in a position where we can't provide the services for our constituents that we're required to do. So where I think 3.5 would be a nice number, I think it's not a big enough shift if you're only 150 to 200,000 to give away the opportunity to build that fund balance quicker.
And as you know, as Commissioner Coring has said too, is that the concern is what's out there in the future of our economy. And so we got to hedge on that bet also.
And that concern goes to every one of our constituents as well, but,
Yes.
and have we not made the extra progress in our fund balance buildup, which were ahead of the schedule that we put together, which we all approved on? I wouldn't be, you know, suggesting this, but I just feel that there's an opportunity to pass along a little savings to our constituents.
And Bill, I don't know whether this sounded the same way to everyone else, but to me it sounded like you thought that Commissioner Coring would support your 3.99. I think he'd be on the other side with Doug and I.
Oh, that could be true.
I think we should be cautious here. Commissioner Coring hasn't spoken, and I don't want
He's
any
spoken
perception that we're speaking on his behalf. So I think that the four of us can express our opinions and our positions, but Commissioner Coring is not here to speak, so let's not assume that he's leaning one way or the other.
Mr. Chair, I think I hear each of you loud and clear. I'll call Commissioner Coring, and I think that'll answer our question.
Okay?
Okay?
In the meantime, we'll start looking at what 3.5 looks like, and if we can get that out today, we'll get that out to you today, of what that will look like and what the potential impact or benefit will be to the constituents. Keep in mind, 200,000 spread over all the tax base that we have is a very minimal change to the taxpayer. But we'll
Okay.
look at it and pull it up for you.
All right?
Otherwise, is there any other conversation or anything else that you need for the final levy and budget approval before December 14th?
I don't think so. I think you kind of have your directives, and
And then once we nail down that levy percentage, we will get the presentation put together for you. And we do have a December 9th Budget Committee meeting just prior to this, so you will have that information in hand before the December 9th meeting and before the December 14th meeting. So if you have any questions, we can go through that prior to that December 14th meeting.
Good, thank you.
With that, we're jumping to financial status update. I know last month we completely skipped this because there's very little change, and as the last few months, we are pretty much repeating ourselves. Do you want to go through the entire presentation, or do we want to just kind of get some highlights? How do you want to proceed with this portion?
I'll be real honest and blunt. It looks like a copy and paste from last month, so I'm comfortable with not hearing it again. I've read through it, so I understand what's being proposed or updated for us. Others?
Are there any highlights that are worthy of,
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that one.
I say, are there any highlights that you can think of that might be?
No, there's just more. We've getting a little bit closer on getting towards budget in a few items. We do have some of that flip-flopping where we were under budget last month. We're a little over budget this month. There's nothing that's really sticking out. Besides, Highway Department has some additional funding that came in that we're kind of going back and forth with the state on how that's qualified. It is, they are calling it CRRSA, it's CRRSAA funds. They are giving funds to each county based on loss of fuel tax revenues. And they worded it in a way that it sounds like it's coming from ARPA, but it doesn't sound like it's truly coming from ARPA, so there's a lot of back and forth going on with that right now on how that's qualified. Right now, we don't believe it falls under federal guidance, so it opens it up for Highway to spend it on the project they already called out. But there is the risk that if it does become under the purview of ARPA, that we may have to be a little more restricted in how that's spent. But other than that, there isn't significant change from last month to this month.
I do have one question for the Sheriff's Department. These federal dollars that we've been waiting on for, seems like ever, are we seeing those finally flow in? He's smiling, so I'm assuming we haven't seen them.
Mr. Chair, could you be a little bit more specific for me, and then maybe I can clarify my answer?
Dan's coming up. Last month, there was a,
Yeah.
I think the last 2 months, there's been a conversation about some of these dollars that we've been waiting for. And maybe I was wrong in saying federal, maybe they're state, but we were waiting for these dollars to come in to be reflected in the revenue
It's
side.
federal money for the emergency management piece of things, the Homeland Security piece there. And we actually, those did come in, I want to say probably mid to late October. So that was $40,000 that we had been sitting on for probably since May, I do believe, so.
Right. So,
So,
good.
yeah, so they're rolling.
Well, very fast, but they're rolling. All right, thank you very much. I have no other questions. Seems like we're steady as we go here, so.
Yep.
Appreciate that. I want to thank everyone for coming today. I think we're at the end of our timeline here, so thank you for coming. Thank you for all the work you've done on the budget process and the negotiations between each of your departments. It's a phenomenal process. I'm used to the state system where they just tell you from up above what you're going to do and you do it. But this is an interesting process, and I appreciate everybody's effort and concern for one another. So with that, everybody have a good day. Remember, tomorrow's Veterans Day. You can all have the day off, by the way, if you'd like. That's up to you folks. There's a nice presentation going to take place, I think, at 9:30 over at the high school to honor the veterans. If you have an opportunity, take it and show up. Other than that, have a great day.